top funnel is mostly content where you're creating awareness about what you do as a brand, what your product does as a brand, but it's just superficially talking about the product, not too much detail, because you at this point in top, you are establishing yourself as an authority. Your aim should be to establish yourself as an authority in the field, as well as to educate thoroughly about the topic at hand that's linked to your business.
This is The Anonymous Marketer, a podcast where we tackle the biggest questions from the B2B marketing community. But instead of bringing on guests for a quick chat, every question comes from an anonymous source. These are the questions B2B marketers have, but are afraid to ask. Let's start the conversation.
Hello, and welcome to The Anonymous Marketer. I'm your host, Kirsti Lang. Today, we are talking about bottom of funnel strategies, or BoFu strategies, which is awesome because I'm probably going to get to say the word BoFu a whole bunch, which is a lot of fun. Joining me today is Masooma Memon. Masooma and I have been in each other's LinkedIn orbit for a year or two now, and I am such a huge fan of her work. She is one of the best content marketers in the biz, having written for places like Shopify, Vimeo, and Calendly, and a whole bunch of other amazing brands. Masooma, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, finally. I'm so glad we finally got this on the books. We've been talking about it for ages.
Yep.
Yeah, it feels good to meet you in person. I was just saying to Masooma before we started recording that I feel like I know her already just from her LinkedIn content and kind of following her work. So it's like chatting to a friend.
Yeah. And we finally got around to doing it.
Yes, we make the time. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we get into the weird and wonderful world of BoFu, I honestly love that word so much. Some housekeeping. The show is called The Anonymous Marketer because we take questions from marketers without revealing their identities. In order to submit a question for the show, you can go to marketersindemand.com/anonymous, and you'll see a form where you can tell us a bit about the biggest challenge you are facing right now. And I'll invite an expert like Masooma on to give us their take on the solution. So the question for today's show, it's a pretty simple one. We're getting loads of traffic to our website every month with our content marketing, but we're struggling to convert these people. What bottom of funnel strategies actually work in B2B? So, Masooma, before we get into that, I want to address what I feel like is the elephant in the room. I've seen so much chatter about how the traditional marketing funnel is dead. I think that was like a LinkedIn hot take for a couple of months last year, and then the chatter kind of fizzled away. But I know content marketing is obviously your wheelhouse, but I'd love to hear your perspective on the funnel is dead hot take.
Okay, so I'm not a very strong believer in the funnel itself. What I actually like about it is the fact that it helps you categorize your content based on the reader's awareness level. But what I like is when you look at your content, the strategy that you're planning, you preferably plan it as a resource library for your reader. So one piece links to another, then leads to another. So it's like you're creating a playground of sorts for your reader, so that they are learning about your tool, they're learning, developing their knowledge on the topic at hand and stuff. So you don't have to divide all pieces strictly into top of the funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel, but you can use these as markers. So the point about using a funnel, the funnel is not dead in the strict sense, right?
Yeah, she's okay. She's still around.
Yeah, she's surviving. Yeah. But she is great help when you are planning your content according to the awareness level, so that the content that you create speaks to the reader's awareness level. So someone who doesn't know about your product as much might just need a small introduction to the tool, just a slip in of the tool in the BoFu top funnel, and more detailed feature deep dives when you're going into middle and bottom of the funnel, because at this point, someone already has an idea of what your tool does. So it's okay to talk more about it and not confuse the reader.
I love that. I love that analogy about having a content playground for your audience, like a journey. And I'd imagine that kind of categorizing that, just organizing your content in that way, it almost gives you kind of a checklist for things that this is a top of funnel piece. This is what needs to be included. Middle of funnel, this is what we need to be speaking to. Can you just talk a little bit about, ballpark figures, for want of a better analogy? What is top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel in terms of content?
Okay, so top funnel is mostly content where you're creating awareness about what you do as a brand, what your product does as a brand, but it's just superficially talking about the product, not too much detail, because you at this point in top, you are establishing yourself as an authority. Your aim should be to establish yourself as an authority in the field, as well as to educate thoroughly about the topic at hand that's linked to your business. So when you educate very thoroughly, very comprehensively on the topic in the top funnel, you're basically positioning yourself as authority. People start trusting you. So top funnel, I like to call it as a stage where you're building a lot of trust, right? And then moving forward, the deeper funnel, I don't like to distinguish too much between middle and the bottom funnel. I like to call it the deeper funnel stages, where a reader is like, has been reading a lot of your content, has been coming across and believes that you are an authority who can solve their problems. So they trust you. And at this point, they're like, okay, tell me what your product does. And so you talk about your product in detail. And there are the sort of people who are already aware that they have a certain problem and they want to solve it using software. So they're trying to select which software and trying to, compare software. So that is where the deeper funnel stages of content, content come in to explain to the reader why your tool.
I love that.
Yeah, but the key over here is never positioning your product as the hero, but continuing to keep your reader as the hero as you were doing in the top funnel stage.
Oh, that is a hot tip. That is going to be an amazing snippet to promote the show. I can already tell. Okay, let me get into the deeper questions that I have about this. Let's get stuck into BoFu. We've already discussed a little bit about what it is. What are some formats that are good strategies for B2B companies specifically?
Okay, so keeping in mind the question that we had from the listener, I would say that I would begin with the fact that if you aren't already mentioning your product, go back to your top performing pieces and review them to include more product mentions, product slip-ins, right? And see how that does. Then plan the future pieces with your product mentions and slip-ins and product education in mind. So whether we call it BoFu or middle funnel content or whatever name we give, it's basically just content talking about your product. So a very simpler way to call this is product-led content, and you can be using different formats for it. So it could be more towards, if you want to stick towards the blog, it's going to be comparison articles. So you versus Y tool. It's going to be tool listicles, alternate tool listicles. For example, ConvertKit alternatives if I were an ESP, right? And then best tools for X use case or Y ICP, right? These are strictly towards the blog content format that you can use, the types of posts that you can include where you're talking about your product. And last one is feature deep dives, where you go into how to do X with our product, or how to use, or how XYZ, say a company, you're leveraging social proof, is using our tool to do, drive certain results that your ICP wants to drive, right? That's one format. And then there is also, because I'm big on not limiting yourself to blog content only when it comes to product-led or BoFu content, right? You can do, because webinars are hot, and I know that you did an episode with Lindsay on this as well.
Yes.
So you can do product-led webinars. And I love how Miro does them. What they do is they invite their customers on the show, and they ask them to tell other attendees how they're using X features or how they're using the tool overall in their workflow and what results they're driving, right?
Yeah.
So these type of product-led contents and product-led content, product-led webinars are helpful for not just people who are your paying customers, but also for customers who are interested in you. So I like to see these product-led webinars as ways that you can not only unlock new users, but also unlock new use cases. So your paying customers are learning how to use more of your tool, which helps you reduce churn in the long term, right?
Yeah, I love
So
that.
that is, product-led webinars. And we talked about blog content, the sort of blog content that you can create, comparison post listicles and alternate tools and feature deep dives. And then we've also got video marketing for BoFu content. So what you do over here is you do, like commonly what we do is YouTube channels with feature tutorials, right? But you can go greater than that, and you talk it to how we are using our own tool. So how we're drinking our own champagne. Vimeo did this recently.
Oh,
and
that's much better than the...
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I've never heard that before, and I love that so much more than eating our own dog food.
Yeah. I don't like to call that. So I like the champagne
Yes.
part.
We
So
drink our own champagne.
Yep. And that's really, authority boosting. It shows that your product is so good that you're using it yourself. So it kind of sends this authority boosting trust signal toward your readers, psychologically speaking. So Vimeo did this series called How We Vimeo, where they talk to their different members in their company and how they're using Vimeo in their workflow. And then what
Oh,
we
I
did,
love that.
yeah. So the How We Vimeo, they recorded these sessions and then highlighted a few of the main feature use cases in the final video, but then the rest of the content, they didn't let it go. They repurposed it and they sent it over to me. And what we did was we repurposed it as blog content. So we had a How We Vimeo series. The video was embedded in the blog. And then we also had how our content manager is using Vimeo to do XYZ or, create a better brand experience and stuff like that.
Oh man, that is a brilliant idea that I may steal for my own work. I love talking about, so long-time listeners of the show will know that I am a content marketer at BoFu. And I love talking about how I use BoFu, how I build it into my workflow. Obviously, it's B2B and B2C. But I think it does add, to your point about adding just a level of authenticity and authority. Like, yes, we are drinking the champagne. We are dog fooding, for the worst analogy. Yeah, it's such a powerful psychological tool. And then to your point about video, this is something that I wanted to ask you about in terms of kind of hosting workshops. It's such a great starting point for your content flow, right? Because that can become the most beautiful either snippets for social or blog posts in their entirety. There is so much good stuff. And I often find this, that when I'm creating content, is even if you kind of have like an email interview with someone, or you just pop over a couple of questions to an expert, you're never going to get the level of detail that you get when they are presenting on something or talking about something. So it will spark new content ideas, quite apart from kind of creating a blog post in its entirety, in depth, beautiful, beautiful depth. Yeah, that is such a good
and
point.
you can certainly repurpose that into newsletters as well. Send that to your segmented list of interested folks, folks you're nurturing, right? The sales team can send it to folks they're nurturing, as well as send it to customers, paying customers already. So you're unlocking more use cases for them, educating them more. So when you kind of just think of it as pure product education and stop worrying too much about conversions, it starts converting then. So it's a mindset game.
So just change your mindset. Psychologically, maybe this anonymous marketer is in the wrong place. That's true, because you kind of stop thinking about people as, numbers to convert, numbers on a list that need to be converted. They are actual humans who need to be using your product to solve real problems that they are facing in their work. Yeah, and it's helpful just to kind of have a conversation with them through your content rather than just click here. I'm assuming you mentioned in your first piece of advice to our anonymous marketer, you mentioned product slip-ins, product mentions. What are some ways to weave that into your best content without being salesy and gross?
I was actually going to get there myself. So, and like when we talked about the mindset thing, when you change your mindset to pure product education, you also become less salesy, because you're not obsessing over conversions, right? So that's one. But mainly there are two basic ways that you can not come across as salesy. The first one is the way you're talking about your product. So like I mentioned, you don't need to position your product as the hero in the story, but give the hero spotlight to the reader. Continue giving it like you do in top of the funnel resources. So what I like to refer to this is like be the Alfred to the Batman. Right? So so your hero, your reader is the Batman, the hero. And the content resources that you're providing is the Alfred. Because you know how Alfred is always ready for Batman, having all the resources ready so he can do his job well. So your content needs to be that resource. It needs to educate, and it needs to make your reader take their own decisions. Instead of pushing them to buy from you, just give them all the resources they need to make the best decision for themselves. Right, so there's one of this. Continue giving giving the hero position to your reader. Okay, and the second one is to empower your readers. Now you can do that by focusing on not just value but actionable value. When you do that, your product slip-ins and mentions and mini tutorials within the blog content become more of a value add rather than a salesy add-on. Now I say this because when you're empowering your readers, with actionable advice, you're enabling them to do solve whatever problem they're here to solve, right? So you're not just talking, for example, you're not just explaining how to do XYZ with your tool, but you're also explaining the other tools involved within the process. So you're not self-obsessing, but you're explaining the entire process stepwise. So they're learning the full thing. They're learning the full flow of how to solve the problem. At this point, when you do that, they start trusting you because they can see that your advice is helping them solve their problem. And as a result, you earn the right to talk about your product, pitch it, slip in a mention, and readers would be totally receptive to it. A good way to think of it is to be a little empathetic, read the blog content yourself, and put yourself in your reader's shoes and see, is this really helping me? If it is really helping you already, it's a good point. It's completely okay. You can tell that the reader has earned the trust, and you have earned your reader's trust, and it's okay to talk about your product.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of earning it. You've unlocked something for me there. I've never really thought of it in that way. I like to talk about kind of leading with value, have your value up front, but yeah, mentioning your product in helpful content is an earned right if you really do want to engage your audience. Yeah.
Because, in that case, yeah.
No, please. You were going to say something great. I just know it.
Yeah, because, in that case, you are not talking about your product, but you're continuing to solve your reader's problem. So then it's like it becomes more reader focus than product focus, because you're continually solving the reader's problem, and your tool just becomes an asset to solve that problem within the rest of the problems that you're solving for them.
And this is something that I find in the content that I create as well. I just, off the top of my head, I recently was working on a social media analytics article, and it was very kind of one of the formats that you've mentioned. Here are all the tools that you can use, and mentioned buffer, mentioned competitors, and then went in depth and mentioned all of the analytics within the native analytics within the social media platforms themselves, and walked readers through, okay, this is how you analyze, this is where you get your metrics in Facebook, which is harder than it seems. Facebook is very confusing at the moment.
Yeah.
For every platform, this is exactly how you do it. So ultimately, hey, you can solve your problem without using buffer. Sure, buffer's going to make it easier, or one of these other great tools on the list is going to make it a whole bunch easier. But there is a solution in this article, whether you sign up for buffer or not.
In that case, they will always, whenever they're ready to move from free tools to a paid solution, they will come back to you because they would remember that buffer helps.
I worked so hard on that
because
article,
it's if you pay attention, that's how we actually respond to content ourselves, right? When you're reading content, we just need to pay more attention to how we are consuming content and how we are reacting to it. If there's something that's leaving us like, oh God, a product slipping right in the top of the article, no way. So there's something to avoid for yourself as well.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think looking at your content with an empathetic eye and an outsider's eye, I think is key before you hit publish. This is something you've touched on a little bit already, Masooma, but I want to go back to some examples of brands that are doing bottom of the funnel content really well. You mentioned Miro, you mentioned Vimeo.
Yeah. So we've also got Dropbox. So they do this another kind of format. They do this other kind of format where they tell customers, they do customer storytelling very well. So normally what we have in deeper funnel content for conversions and for sales enablement is case studies. But everybody and their mother knows that the case study intent is to buy from us, buy from us. And a lot of companies don't put too much attention into how they're presenting case studies. So they often become a, templated version of, hey, this is X, and you could drive Y results. So what Dropbox is doing really well is they are, writing entire stories, including the background of the person who is using Dropbox, how they were doing, what they were doing, the pain points they were going through, the struggles they were going through, and then and somewhere in that journey, they started using Dropbox. So it's leveraging social proof. It keeps it focused on the reader, and then it's not making the Dropbox the hero of the story, but the customer itself.
Yeah.
In doing so, it's telling the reader that Dropbox is very much focused on my own success, like the reader's success, rather than the success of, rather than taking some money from them, converting them and stuff. So if you get around the time and go to read their customer stories, they are beautifully written. There's a lot of emotional storytelling in it. The struggles are captured beautifully. The social proof is at, full spotlight. And throughout, you would see how you are reading about a person solving a certain problem in their life in a certain way. And Dropbox just comes in between as an asset. It's just the Alfred to the Batman.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good analogy. I'm going to use that for the rest of my career going forward. I love what you talk about, what you mentioned about that emotional connection and making the customer in the case study the hero, because so often we talk about, it's really difficult for B2B content to kind of weave in storytelling and weave in real people, weave in, real life, authentic stories. And case studies are such a great way to do that. And I often feel like they're a missed opportunity because we tend to focus so much on the numbers. So company X did Y with product Z. They achieved this percent or this metric, whatever the number is. And I think those numbers are important, but they're not the whole story. And they're not what your reader is going to remember. They're going to remember how Jessica from this small business was able to solve this really irritating problem that you are also facing, rather than the fact that she tripled revenue or whatever the case is.
I'd just add that those numbers are strictly important now also, specifically for enterprise buyers, because B2B buyers are becoming more risk averse, right? So they need to prove the ROI of the investment to their CFO firsthand before, So if you focus on that ROI, that's equally important, because you have to be, creating content based on the way people are buying lately. But at the same time, don't forget that it has to be, it has to leverage storytelling. So reframing case studies as customer storytelling, taking inspiration from brands that are doing it well, it's a really good way to, get those case studies, those customer stories to convert.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I love that you mentioned that, because with the difficulty with B2B content, right? You're not talking to the person that ultimately
You're talking to the
makes the
entire
decision.
team, the buying committee.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe you're building authority with a person who would really like to use their product, and you need to be giving them, really like to use your product rather, and you need to be giving them enough kind of ammunition to go to their manager or whoever is in charge of, product purchasing and convince them. And that's where those numbers really do come in handy.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So on that note, again, something we've touched on a bit, but something I'd like to dig into a little bit more is B2B and B2C brands have quite different approaches to this type of content historically. What B2C tactics should B2B brands look to incorporate into their bottom of funnel content?
Right. I think the first one would be a more product showcase. So less salesy, but pure product education, and not hesitating from talking about the tool in an educational way. So a few of the simplest ways you can do this is to, for example, one, ask your founder or your content team or the product team to create these feature tutorials, right? For example, like you were saying, how you use buffer in your workflow. Or if you've seen Ren Fishkin from SparkToro, he's the founder of it.
He's great.
Yeah, and he does these really good videos. I had no idea what SparkToro is or had no interest in it, but those videos got me. I'm like, okay. And now I'm talking about this, recommending the tool left and right.
Yeah, it's a difficult product to grasp, I think. And it makes it even harder. So your content has to be so much better when the product is something a little bit different.
Yeah, so like it's taking it from the B2C industry. It's like you are including the human face, which is the founder or any other team member, or just let employees build a personal brand. I know you have another episode on that as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I love this. You're promoting it. Thank you.
And then, because, I'm huge on internal linking, so that's how I roll.
Yes. It's baked in.
And then you're just including the human faces, and then you're also doing the product showcase. So that's one, with feature tutorials using your creators, so your own in-house creators. And then more to interactive demos and ungated product demos, so that people can play around, less of hidden pricing, custom codes, because it just adds friction to buying that B2B product. So provide more of those self-serve resources. And this other thing that because we're talking about product showcases, is that you pay attention to the product screenshots that you're adding. So there's so much missed opportunity I see, because those screenshots tend to be so hard to read. They're not accessible. They're short, but you can, zoom in bit, use annotated screenshots, and there is so much you can teach about your product and create excitement about how easy to use that tool is by including product screenshots on your social media, in your blog content, in your newsletters even. So a couple of ways to showcase your product in the way that B2C does. And there's one more thing that I love that B2B can take from B2C is more creative partnerships. So you pair with the people in the B2B industry who are using your tools. So for example, if I'm using BoFu, you pair with me, and then I do it how I use BoFu thing on my social media. So like people who trust me or any other influencer, let's say, they're going to be like, okay, so she's using BoFu. So more trust, more social proof, the way influencers market in a very natural way. So that is what I really love. And I think Podia does this really well.
Okay, interesting. I've never actually seen their influencer content.
No, it's on Instagram, and what they do is they pair with creators on how they're using Podia to create the courses and stuff. And there's a podcast episode on Jimmy Daly's podcast with the VP of Marketing of Podia, Benjamin.
Oh man, I love Jimmy Daly's show. I need to check it out. Yeah.
And he detailed how they were doing creative partnerships for Podia.
That is brilliant.
This is something B2B needs to tap more into. Because it's just clear, it's a stronger version of using the human element and social proof of getting product education and those conversions.
I'm so excited about this shift in B2B now, because, I love the idea of building a personal brand. I love LinkedIn. I love this kind of evolution of influencers. And I know a lot of B2B or like kind of professional influencers will like shy away from that term, because it does come with baggage.
But it doesn't have to be salesy,
I feel like that.
It's just if you're already, if you're already using the tool, it's not going to be salesy. Because if I'm already using Trello, it's very easy for me to tell you about how I'm using it in my workflow. It's just as far as they just have to partner with me and we do it together. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, so back when Nick Bennett was still hosting The Anonymous Marketer, we do also have an episode on this. I can't remember who the expert was on the show. I'll link it in the show notes. Yeah, but it's a great episode on how to build an influencer or create a marketing campaign with for B2B brands. Masooma, I want to come back to something you did mention as well, is you mentioned partnering with in-house creators. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you meant there? Because this is the realm that I'm excited about.
Yeah, so it's like creating internal creators, right? And I see this happening a lot. Like, for example, the SEMrush or SEMrush, however you prefer to pronounce it, team does that. So all of you could call it creating internal creators, or you could call it having an employee advocacy program. So they talk not just about how they're using the tool that they're selling, but also other things in their lives. So they're like, let them create these personal brands over on social media, and then encourage them to distribute the content that you're creating, help them on, give them prompts, proofread the content, give them ideas for what to post and what are the benefits of posting it. So you just have, as if you're a content person or a marketer on the team, you have to educate basically two classes. So one is the C-suite on the benefits of creating this employee advocacy program or internal creators, and then the internal creators who are interested, you have to educate them on how that is going to benefit them. I know you've done this for BoFu as well as before when you were with the previous team. And what it does is, it develops a certain level of interest. People follow you in understanding what you're doing in your day-to-day, how you're using your tool. That is way more educational because what creative partnerships does is you reach your target audience where they are. So instead of if it is people coming on your blog, that's one thing, but another warm channel that you can use is, for example, LinkedIn, if your target audience is over there. So you're reaching them there using your creative partners. There's most of these social media platforms like LinkedIn let you have more, like the algorithm is more positive and kind towards personal pages than company brands.
Absolutely, yes.
So leverage that, right? Leverage that to your benefit and ask your creators to just talk about their day-to-day. The more pull up a doc where there's do's and don'ts, create it with your PR teams, like don't talk about this. So they have these guidelines, and then just let them, create content and see how it works and how it converts for you as well.
Yeah, I love that. I just want to weigh in there with another social platform. I think a lot of in the B2B space, like people kind of are like, yeah, we need to be on LinkedIn. And yes, you do. Absolutely, you do. And that is a great playground for building a personal brand. But I'm seeing some really fun stuff happening in a more professional realm on Threads. Mm-hmm. It is such a great social platform. It is really, really positive. It is, I think it's what Twitter used to be, or X used to be, and then some. And it's difficult for brands to be making any headway there, in the same way that it's now quite difficult for LinkedIn company pages to get noticed and to attract attention. When I was still running LinkedIn company pages for Comsol, I know they've launched an internal creator strategy now, and it's going brilliantly. But back then, when we were kind of still following, the traditional route, we just couldn't get the kind of traction that people, like the CEO and the sales folk and everyone else working there was getting on LinkedIn. And that's
because even if I see myself as a consumer over here, content consumer, I wouldn't have paid attention to what Comsor does if it were coming from a brand page. That level of trust doesn't come when you do it from a brand page. But now I know they've launched 2 new products, and I'm paying attention because I see Melissa, I see their CEO, founder, everybody talking about it. I'm like, oh God, that's such a nice way of creating hype,
It is, and they have done an incredible job of creating hype. There are some crazy videos going on there. I think that is a great example of a company that is doing, are they B2B at this point? I think they're B2B and B2C, but they are a good example. I think they've also got an in-house video editor now who is doing some great work for them, which has been immensely helpful. Yeah, so that's another fun example of content to explore. Let me go over my questions. I feel like we've kind of segued into everything that I wanted to talk about already. We've touched on some SaaS brands that are doing BoFu well. We've touched on B2C brands that are doing BoFu well. Masooma, if you could speak directly to this anonymous marketer who is scratching their head over converting people with BoFu, what would you tell them?
I would say you collaborate with your sales, customer support, and product team to understand how the product works and the pain points, hesitations, as well as the jobs to be done that your target readers have. Because when you do that, you'll be able to create product-led content that actually converts. So what happens, even if you nail the way you're talking about your product, it's not salesy, and you're keeping the focus on the reader rather than on positioning your product as the hero, it might not help you as much as when you talk to the product team, talk to the sales team to dig out the hesitations and address those hesitations within your content. Because when somebody is reading your content, and let's assume you're already educating them. If you already aren't, you should be. But if assuming you get to the point where you are educating about your product, right? So what you're supposed to do is address those hesitations they have. Like, is it the price factor that's holding them back? What are the factors that are holding them back? And then answer them within your content. So your content will speak more to them. That's one thing. And this other thing that is really important and I'm a fan of, is what you do is you dig out, unearth the jobs to be done for your target reader, or the ideal customer profile, as the sales team would call them, right? So when you do that, you can identify how you can, map out how your product features are helping those readers achieve their jobs to be done. And that is how you can, specify the benefits of the product using the product feature to help achieve certain outcome that your reader wants to achieve from using your tool. This way, there is less feature-led selling in your content and more benefits-led, product-led content, because you're talking about more benefits than just specifying how the feature works, which can get a little too salesy at points. You might not realize it, but it might get salesy at some point. So focus on the jobs to be done so that your content is outcome oriented, and they can see like, okay, so this is the outcome that this feature lets me understand. So if you're creating content, I will tell this market, if you're creating your product or product-led content, or your content overall in a silo, get out of it. Talk to the product team to understand the features, the feature use cases, who is supposed to use it, and then when in their workflow they're supposed to use it. I also advise a lot of teams on documenting your findings so that you are consistent in the content you're creating, as well as it's easy to scale the content with other external and internal writers when you're ready to scale that kind of product-led content. So 2 things that I highly recommend to documents are a feature cheat sheet that specifies what a feature does, when to use it, who is it for, and then links to the knowledge base. Refer to it every time you're creating content to pick out which features you want to highlight, yeah? And the second one is a positioning doc that tells how we talk about our product, how we talk about our competitors, who we are for, and who we are not for. So that, you're clear in your content that we are not for XYZ. So I remember Hotjar doing a piece on, I think it was Hotjar itself. So what they did, they don't have a mobile app. I think the competitors might. So they're very frank about it, that if a mobile app is your priority, we don't offer that. You might, it's okay to go to an alternative tool if that is your priority. So they're being transparent with it. And of course, that might not get you a sale, might not get you a conversion, you might lose a customer, but in the long haul, that person would become a fan of your content and your approach to being so transparent that they will likely recommend you to others. And whenever, let's say, they switch to another company, they might be ready to explore Hotjar again. So these are the 2 documents that I recommend you create. And one more thing I would add is when you're talking about competitors, please do not badmouth them. It leaves a very bad impression on you.
It does. It's the worst.
I see so many companies do it in their web copy. Don't do it. I was researching website hosts and website builders, and all of them, nearly all of them in their web copies have this so much bad mouthing about the competitor, and I'm like, you're turning me off. It's cringe. Don't do that. If I am interested, it's turning off my interest switch instantly. You don't have to rely on bad mouthing to position yourself as a hero. You should have the data to do it yourself.
Yes. And on that note, that is a brilliant way to end this episode. Masooma, thank you so much for your time. I have learned so much. I'm going to go and create those documents. I mean, they probably exist somewhere in our documentation ecosystem already. I'm going to go and pull them out and grab them for easy reference. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Anyone who has a question like this one, please do send it through to marketersindemand.com/anonymous, and I will bring on a brilliant expert like Masooma or Masooma again to answer it. Thank you so much, Masooma. Have a great day.
Thank you. It was exciting chatting with you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of The Anonymous Marketer. This show is part of Marketers in Demand, a network of podcasts featuring the world's leading B2B marketers. Unlock your full potential as a B2B marketer by going to marketersindemand.com.